Look at your hand right now. Go ahead. Really look at it for a moment. The hand you're looking at can do things no other creature on this planet can do. It can write stories that move millions, perform delicate surgery, build entire cities, compose music that outlives generations, and yet, if you rewind the clock far enough back millions of years, those same kinds of hands were doing something far simpler. They were gripping branches holding onto rough bark in dense African forests, belonging to creatures that were not quite human and not quite ape either. So here is the question that has quietly followed humanity for centuries. At what moment did everything change? At what point did we stop being them and start becoming us? Tonight, we're going to travel backward, not just a little, but all the way back to the beginning. We're going to follow a long, fragile chain of moments, small changes, tiny decisions, subtle adaptations that somehow added up to something extraordinary to you. Lying here now, listening to this story, and I promise you this, the journey is far stranger, far more unpredictable, and far more human than anything you were ever taught. Picture this 7 million years ago. The sun is sinking slowly over a vast African landscape. The air is warm, the light is soft, and somewhere between patches of forest and open grass, a small creature moves carefully through the terrain. It pauses for a second, then rises onto two legs. Not fully, not confidently, just for a moment long enough to see above the grass, to check for danger, to search for food. It doesn't know what it's doing. Means it doesn't know that this simple action, standing upright for a few seconds, will echo through millions of years. It doesn't know that one day creatures like you will walk on those same two legs across continents, build civilizations, and even leave the planet itself. It is simply trying to survive. And that's how this story begins. Not with intention, not with intelligence, not with destiny, but with survival. Because evolution doesn't plan ahead. It doesn't aim for perfection. It responds moment by moment to pressure, to change, to opportunity. And sometimes, just sometimes, a small advantage becomes the beginning of everything over time. That ability to stand, even briefly, becomes more useful. Individuals who can do it a little better, survive a little longer, find more food, avoid more danger, raise more offspring. Generation after generation, tiny shifts accumulate. Bones, change shape muscles, adapt balance improves, until something new begins to emerge. A body that is no longer fully built for the trees and not yet fully built for the ground. A transition, a question mark, a possibility. Millions of years pass and the landscape itself begins to change. Forests thin out. Grasslands expand, the world becomes more open, more exposed, more dangerous, but also full of new opportunities. And now, walking upright is no longer just an occasional behavior. It becomes an advantage. It frees the hands, allows longer travel, conserves energy across distances. The body continues to transform the spine, curves, the pelvis, shifts, the legs, lengthen the feet, reshape. And without realizing it, these early ancestors are stepping further and further away from their past. But here is where things become important. This was not a straight path. There was no single line from that first upright step to modern humans. There were many paths, many experiments, many species trying different solutions to the same problem. Most of them failed. Most of them disappeared without leaving a trace. And the only reason we can tell this story is because one path continued long enough to reach you somewhere along that path. Something else begins to change. The hands they stop only holding, they begin exploring, turning objects, testing them, striking one thing against another. At first, it means nothing. Just repetition, just curiosity, until one moment something different happens. A sharp edge appears where there was none before. And that moment, quiet and almost invisible, changes everything. Because now the world is no longer just something you live in. It becomes something you can shape, something you can change, something you can use. And once that begins, it never stops. The individuals who understand this even slightly gain an advantage. They can access food. Others cannot. They survive longer. And over time, that advantage grows. The brain begins to change, not suddenly, not dramatically, but enough to support something new. Understanding. If I do this, something happens, and that understanding deepens, becomes more reliable, becomes more useful. Tools become intentional, not accidental. They become extensions of the body and eventually extensions of thought. Because to make a tool, you must imagine it before it exists. You must hold a version of the future in your mind and then act to bring it into reality. And that ability changes everything. It means you are no longer only reacting. You are beginning to create, and that requires more. More memory, more awareness, more connection, because this does not happen alone. These early humans live in groups. They watch each other. They learn from each other. They repeat what works. And slowly, something new appears. Knowledge, not instinct, not genetics, but something shared each generation, no longer starts from zero. It begins slightly ahead of the last, and that changes the speed of everything. The world continues to shift. Climates, change, resources, move, and those who adapt survive. But now, adaptation is not only physical, it is behavioral, flexible, responsive. And then something enters the story that changes everything again. Fire at first, it is something to fear, something unpredictable, something destructive. But eventually it becomes something else, something that can be controlled, used, maintained. Fire brings warmth, light, protection, but most importantly, it transforms food. It makes it easier to eat, easier to digest, more efficient, and more energy becomes available. And that extra energy supports something critical, the brain. Because the brain is expensive, it demands fuel. And now, for the first time, there is enough. And with that, the brain grows. And with the brain, everything else grows. Awareness, memory, understanding. But fire does something else too. Something subtle but powerful. It brings people together. It creates a place to gather, a reason to stay, to sit, to share. And in those moments, something begins to form. Communication becomes more structured, more consistent. Sounds become patterns. Patterns become meaning. Meaning becomes shared, and slowly language begins. Not just sounds, but ideas past future possibility. And now humans can do something no other species can do. They can imagine things that are not real. They can share those ideas and act on them together. And that is where everything accelerates. Because once you can imagine, you can plan. Once you can share, you can build. Once you can believe, you can cooperate, and groups grow. Connections expand. Trust extends beyond direct experience into shared understanding, into shared stories. And those stories become powerful. They shape behavior, define identity, guide action. And now, humans begin to move not just within familiar lands, but beyond them, into unknown environments across vast distances. They adapt. They learn, they survive, not because they are stronger, but because they can think, plan, coordinate, and imagine. And every step they take builds on everything that came before, a long chain of moments, unbroken, leading here to this moment, to you. And now something shifts again, not in the body, not in the landscape, but in the way these early humans begin to see the world. They are no longer only reacting to what is in front of them. They begin to anticipate, to expect, to prepare for things that have not happened yet. Seasons become patterns. Patterns become knowledge. And knowledge becomes something that can be remembered and shared across time. And with that, survival becomes less about chance and more about understanding. A group that remembers where water was found during the last dry season does not need to wander blindly. They move with intention, guided by memory, guided by experience, and that alone changes the odds in a world where mistakes are unforgiving. And over time, those memories become more detailed, more structured, more reliable. They are passed from one generation to the next, not through instinct, but through communication, through repetition, through something that begins to resemble teaching. A younger member watches an older one not just to copy movements, but to understand choices, why this path is taken, why this place is avoided, why this resource matters more than another. And slowly something forms that did not exist before, a shared understanding of the world. Not just individual awareness, but collective knowledge, something larger than any single mind. This collective knowledge allows groups to survive in ways that no individual could achieve alone. It allows them to adapt faster, respond better, and recover from mistakes that would have once been fatal. And with that advantage, groups begin to grow. Slightly larger connections extend beyond immediate family, and cooperation becomes more complex, more necessary, more refined. But with larger groups come new challenges: conflict, competition, tension, and now survival is not only about the environment, but about each other, about managing relationships, about maintaining balance within the group. Those who can navigate this, who can understand others, who can predict behavior, who can maintain trust, gain another kind of advantage, one that has nothing to do with strength or speed. And this begins to shape the mind in a new way, because understanding the environment is one thing, but understanding other individuals requires something deeper, something more flexible. It requires memory of past interactions, recognition of patterns in behavior, and the ability to respond differently depending on context and relationship. And this is where the mind begins to expand in complexity, not just in size, but in function, in structure, in capability. Social awareness becomes just as important as physical survival, and in some cases even more important, because being accepted within the group can determine whether you live or disappear. And so communication continues to evolve, not just in sounds, but in meaning, in nuance, in intention, expressions, gestures, tones. All begin to carry information beyond simple signals. A sound is no longer just a warning or a call. It becomes a message, something that can change behavior, influence decisions, guide action. And over time, those messages become more precise, more consistent, more understood across individuals and generations. Now, a group does not just react together, it begins to think together, to act as a unit, to move with shared purpose. And that shared purpose becomes one of the strongest forces in human survival, because it allows coordination on a level no other species achieves. A hunt is no longer a random event. It becomes planned, organized, timed individuals, take positions, anticipate movement, respond together. And even failure becomes useful because it teaches something. It adds to the shared knowledge. It improves the next attempt. And this process repeats again and again, slowly, refining behavior, increasing efficiency, strengthening the group. At the same time, the environment continues to change, forcing new challenges, new decisions, new adaptations, and each challenge pushes the mind a little further, requires a little more flexibility, a little more creativity. And this is where something subtle begins to emerge, something difficult to define, but impossible to ignore: curiosity. Not just reacting, not just surviving, but exploring, testing, trying things without immediate necessity. A new object is not ignored. It is examined, turned over, studied, even when it is not immediately useful. And sometimes that curiosity leads to nothing. But sometimes it leads to something unexpected, something valuable, something that changes behavior in a small way. And those small changes accumulate just like everything else, slowly building over time, creating new possibilities, new directions. And now the world becomes more than just a place to survive. It becomes something to explore, something to understand, something to engage with. And with that shift, movement changes. Again, groups do not only move because they must, they move because they can, because there is something to find, something to learn. And this leads them into new environments, unfamiliar conditions, different resources, different dangers. And each new environment forces adaptation, forces learning, forces change. Some groups fail, unable to adjust, unable to survive the new conditions. But others succeed. They learn, they adapt, they continue. And those successful groups carry forward not just their genes, but their knowledge, their behaviors, their ways of interacting with the world. And over time, this creates diversity. Different groups developing slightly different strategies, slightly different habits, slightly different ways of living. And this diversity becomes another advantage because it increases the chances that at least some groups will survive whatever changes come next. And as this continues, something else becomes more noticeable. Time itself begins to matter, not just the present moment, but sequences, patterns, cycles. The past becomes a source of information. The future becomes something that can be influenced, and the present becomes a point of decision. And this awareness changes behavior again, because now actions are not just immediate responses. They are part of a sequence, part of something larger. And this is where planning becomes more refined, more deliberate, more complex, because now individuals and groups can think beyond the immediate. They can prepare for what is coming, not just react to what is happening. And that ability continues to shape everything. It influences movement, resource use, social interaction, communication, all of it becoming more connected, more structured, more intentional. And still this process continues without awareness, without recognition, without any understanding of what is being built. Each generation lives and disappears unaware that they are part of something vast, something unfolding across millions of years. And yet every small action, every adaptation, every survival contributes to what comes next, shaping the path in ways that cannot be seen in the moment. And now, as this continues, the gap between what these humans were and what they are becoming grows wider, not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily, consistently, until eventually they are no longer just another species adapting to the environment. They are something different, something capable of shaping that environment in return. And this shift continues quietly building layer upon layer of change, leading further and further away from that first uncertain step in the grass, towards something more complex, more aware, more capable, and all of it still connected, still part of the same long chain, still carrying forward the same underlying drive to survive, to adapt, to continue, no matter what comes next. And as this process continues, something else begins to take shape, something less visible, but far more powerful than any physical change. Patterns of behavior start to stabilize. Actions that once happened by chance begin to repeat with intention, and repetition slowly turns into structure. Certain places become familiar, not just because they offer resources, but because they are remembered. A river bend, a cluster of trees, a sheltered space. These locations begin to hold meaning, not symbolic meaning yet, but practical consistency. Something reliable in a world that rarely is. And with that reliability comes a subtle shift. Groups begin to return, not just pass through. They revisit locations based on memory, based on experience, based on expectation. And this creates the earliest sense of place. A place is no longer just a location. It becomes part of behavior, part of movement, part of survival strategy. And this changes how groups navigate the world. They are no longer drifting. They are choosing. Choice introduces complexity because now multiple options exist, multiple paths, multiple outcomes, and the ability to select between them becomes critical. Those who choose better survive longer. Those who repeat effective choices pass them on, and over time, decision-making itself becomes refined, more precise, more informed. And this refinement begins to shape the brain in ways that go beyond simple reaction. It supports comparison, evaluation, prediction, all of which increase the ability to survive in changing conditions. At the same time, interaction within the group becomes more layered. Not just cooperation, but roles begin to emerge. Not fixed roles, not structured positions, but tendencies, patterns. Some individuals become more exploratory, others more cautious, some more observant, others more reactive. And these differences create balance within the group, because a variety of responses increases the chances that at least one will be effective in any given situation. This balance is not planned. It emerges naturally through variation and survival, and over time it strengthens the group as a whole, making it more adaptable, more resilient. Communication continues to evolve alongside this increasing complexity. Signals become more refined, more context, dependent. The same sound can mean different things depending on timing, tone, and situation. And this flexibility allows more precise coordination, especially in moments that require immediate response or careful timing. Gradually, the gap between simple signaling and meaningful communication narrows not through sudden change, but through accumulation. Small adjustments repeated over generations. And with that comes the ability to transmit not just actions but intentions, not just warnings but strategies, not just reactions but ideas. And now behavior is no longer limited to what is directly observed. It can be influenced by what is communicated, which expands the range of possible actions far beyond immediate experience. This is where learning accelerates, because individuals do not need to experience everything themselves. They can benefit from the experiences of others. Mistakes become less costly because they do not need to be repeated by everyone. Success becomes more valuable because it can be shared. And as this continues, knowledge grows not in a single mind, but across many, creating a distributed system of understanding that is far more powerful than any individual could achieve. Meanwhile, the environment continues to present new challenges, forcing constant adjustment, forcing constant refinement, and each challenge tests the limits of what the group knows. Some solutions fail and disappear. Others succeed and become part of the shared system. And over time, this system becomes more efficient, more responsive, more capable of handling complexity. And as complexity increases, so does the need for coordination, not just in immediate actions, but in sequences of actions spread across time. A task may require preparation before execution, and execution before outcome. And each step must align with the others for success to occur. This alignment requires memory planning and communication working together, forming a foundation for more advanced behavior. And slowly, without any awareness of its significance, something new is emerging. A system where thought influences action and action reinforces thought. This feedback loop strengthens over time, creating more stable patterns, more predictable outcomes, and more effective responses to change. And within this loop, individuals begin to anticipate not just events, but the behavior of others, predicting responses, adjusting actions accordingly. And this creates a more cohesive group dynamic, because now coordination does not rely solely on direct signals. It can happen through expectation, through shared understanding, through subtle cues that guide behavior without explicit instruction. And this reduces friction within the group, allowing smoother interaction, faster response, and more effective cooperation. At the same time, movement across the landscape becomes more structured, less random, more guided by accumulated knowledge. Paths are chosen based on prior success. Routes are adjusted based on new information. And over time, certain patterns of movement become established not as fixed routes, but as preferred strategies that increase the likelihood of survival. These patterns can change when necessary, but they provide a baseline, a starting point that reduces uncertainty in an unpredictable world. And as these patterns stabilize, they become easier to transmit, easier to teach, easier to maintain across generations, which further strengthens the continuity of knowledge and behavior within the group. And now something important begins to take form. Continuity itself, not just survival of individuals, but survival of information across time. Information that does not disappear when one life ends, but continues through others, shaping future actions and decisions. This continuity allows progress not rapid, not obvious, but steady, incremental building on what came before. And as this builds, the gap between these humans and their distant ancestors continues to widen not through a single change, but through the accumulation of many. Each small shift, each new behavior, each refined response adding to the whole, creating something more capable, more adaptable, more aware. And still this process continues, without pause, without direction, without intention, simply unfolding as it always has, driven by pressure, opportunity, and the constant need to survive. And within that unfolding, something remains constant. The connection between past and present, every action rooted in what came before, every adaptation shaped by prior conditions, every moment linked to countless others across time. And that connection continues to extend forward, shaping what comes next, influencing outcomes in ways that cannot be seen from within the moment, but are nonetheless real. And as this chain extends further, the potential for new forms of behavior increases because each addition creates new combinations, new possibilities, new directions. And some of those possibilities lead to further complexity, further coordination, further refinement, pushing the system beyond what it once was capable of. And this is how change happens. Not all at once, not through sudden transformation, but through continuous accumulation of small differences, each one barely noticeable on its own, but together forming something entirely new, something that could not have existed without every step that came before it. And this process continues, uninterrupted, shaping individuals, shaping groups, shaping interactions, and gradually moving towards something more structured, more connected, more capable. And even as it moves forward, it carries with it everything that came before, every adaptation, every behavior, every moment of survival, still present, still influencing, still part of what exists now. And that is what keeps the system stable, even as it changes, because nothing is lost. Everything is layered, integrated, built upon creating continuity within transformation. And as long as this continues, as long as pressure exists, as long as opportunity appears, as long as survival depends on adaptation, the process does not stop. It moves forward quietly, consistently, shaping outcomes, guiding behavior, expanding possibility, without ever needing awareness or intention to do so. And as these layers of behavior continue to build, something else begins to emerge, something even less visible but more influential, a sense of timing, not just reacting to events, but anticipating when they will occur and adjusting actions accordingly. Day and night are no longer just changes in light. They become signals, guiding activity, movement, and rest. Certain tasks happen at certain times, not randomly, but with growing consistency. And over time, this sensitivity to timing becomes more refined, allowing groups to align their behavior with patterns that repeat beyond immediate awareness. This alignment increases efficiency because actions happen when conditions are most favorable, reducing wasted effort and unnecessary risk. At the same time, perception itself becomes sharper, not just in the physical sense, but in the way information is processed. Details that once went unnoticed begin to stand out, small differences in sound, movement, texture, all becoming useful. And this growing sensitivity allows earlier detection of change, whether it is danger, opportunity, or subtle shifts in the environment, which leads to quicker response and better outcomes, reinforcing the value of attention and awareness. and attention itself becomes selective, focusing on what matters, filtering out what does not, creating a more efficient use of mental resources. This selectivity shapes behavior because what is noticed influences what is remembered, and what is remembered influences what is done next. And so the cycle continues, perception shaping memory, memory shaping action, and action shaping future perception. Within this cycle, variation still exists. Not every individual perceives the same. Not every response is identical, and this variation creates a range of possibilities within the group. Some responses fail and disappear, others succeed and become part of the shared pattern, gradually refining how the group interacts with the world. And over time, this refinement leads to greater consistency, not rigidity, but reliability, a set of behaviors that tend to produce favorable results. This reliability reduces uncertainty, allowing more stable interaction with an otherwise unpredictable environment. And as stability increases, so does the capacity for exploration. Because when basic survival becomes slightly more secure, there is space for trying new things. Exploration introduces novelty, and novelty introduces new information, some of which becomes useful and integrates into existing patterns. And this integration expands the range of possible responses, increasing adaptability without losing the stability that has already been achieved. Meanwhile, coordination continues to deepen, not just in immediate action, but in sequences that unfold over time. Individuals begin to align not only with each other, but with the unfolding of events. Actions are timed not just to the present moment, but to expected outcomes, creating a smoother flow of behavior within the group. And this flow reduces conflict, reduces wasted effort, and increases the likelihood of success in complex tasks. At the same time, internal states begin to play a larger role in behavior. Not just external conditions, but internal signals influence decisions, energy levels, alertness, tension, all shaping how individuals respond. And this adds another layer of complexity, because behavior is now influenced by both the external world and internal experience, which requires a more flexible system of response, one that can adjust not only to what is happening outside, but also to what is happening within. And this flexibility becomes a key advantage, allowing adaptation across a wider range of conditions without the need for physical change. As this continues, patterns of interaction become more predictable, not because they are fixed, but because they are shaped by repeated successful outcomes. This predictability strengthens coordination, making it easier for individuals to align their actions without constant adjustment. And as alignment improves, the group functions more effectively as a unit rather than as a collection of separate individuals. This collective function increases resilience because the group can absorb disruption without collapsing, maintaining continuity even when conditions change. At the same time, individual variation continues to contribute to the system, providing new responses, new approaches, new ways of interacting with the environment. And this balance between consistency and variation keeps the system dynamic, capable of both stability and change. Over time, this dynamic system becomes increasingly efficient at responding to complexity, handling multiple variables, simultaneously adjusting behavior in real time. And this capability allows groups to operate in environments that would overwhelm less adaptable systems, because they are no longer limited to simple reactions. They can manage sequences, interactions, and dependencies that extend across time. And this extension across time is what allows more advanced forms of behavior to emerge, gradually building toward greater coordination and understanding. Each step supported by everything that came before, each new capability integrated into the existing system without replacing it. And so the process continues, not through sudden transformation, but through continuous layering, each addition increasing the overall capacity of the system. And as capacity increases, the range of possible actions expands, allowing for more complex interaction with the world, which in turn creates new pressures, new opportunities and new directions for change. And within this ongoing movement, there is no final state, no fixed outcome, only a continuous unfolding shaped by the interaction between internal processes and external conditions. And as long as this interaction persists, as long as variation exists and selection continues, the process remains active, moving forward without pause, shaping behavior, shaping structure, shaping possibility in ways that are subtle but cumulative, building over time into something increasingly capable of navigating complexity. And all of it remains connected, each moment linked to the next. Each change rooted in what came before, forming a continuous sequence that carries forward through time, without interruption, without awareness, simply continuing as it always has, guided by the same fundamental principles that began the process from the very start. And now here you are, at the edge of this entire journey, millions of years, compressed into this moment, from a small creature, standing for a second, to you, lying here now, thinking about it, every step, every change, every survival, led here to this quiet moment, where you can look back and actually understand where you came from. But here's the part that changes everything. This story is not finished. It was never finished. Every species before you probably thought it had reached the peak, that it had become what it was meant to be. But evolution never stops. It never reaches an end. It just continues, slowly, quietly, relentlessly. And right now, at this exact moment, it's still happening, inside you, around you, in ways you don't even notice. You are not the final version. You are a step, just like every step before you. And somewhere, far in the future, something else will look back at you the same way you just looked back at those first ancestors, trying to understand what it meant to be you. And that is what makes this story so powerful. You are not just listening to it. You are inside it. You are part of it. You are the continuation of something that refused to disappear against every odd. Through every change, through every challenge, it kept going. And now it's you. So as you drift further and further into rest, let that sink in. Not as a thought, but as a feeling. You made it here through millions of years of survival. And the story is still moving, still unfolding, still waiting for what comes next. Sweet dreams. And I'll see you in the next chapter.